Hello again, and it's time for another project. Today we're going to do some router work on this image of Father Christmas, Santa Claus, whatever you want to call him there. And then we will use a scroll saw at the end just to cut it out. We'll talk about that nearer the time, but for now we'll focus on the routing side of things. So we've printed our image off. When I printed this off, these lines are quite thin, so I let you just get a Sharpie pen and go around the full piece, and we can just widen those lines up to where we want them to be. Then for me personally, I just literally just tape it down onto 12mm plywood, just a bit of scrap wood we had left over from a previous project, and underneath good old carbon paper, also called graphite paper I believe. Make sure you get the paper the right way round. Place that on there, and I use a biro or pen and just draw around this. These are things you can do indoors when it's nice and warm. Around the full piece, put that to one side, and you can save it for when you're ready to do it. And we'll literally remove the template like so. Remember, that means we can also use that template over and over again, so we're not wasting paper and all the rest of it. Originally this was going to be a scroll saw pattern, but we've gone over to the router side of things. So there it is, all nicely transferred on there. That carbon paper has worked really good. You notice the blue lines. Basically all I do when I add the pen is to either shade in the areas that you want to remove. You can put crosses on, noughts, dashes, whatever you want to do. You will go away, come back, and you might just start routing out that line. Well, that's the end of your project, so take your 5 minutes just to colour in or mark off the areas you want to remove. And size wise, it's literally 9 inches by 8 inches across on, like I say, 12mm plywood. For the routing side of things, as always for me, I like to use these little, what I call CNC bits. They come in different degrees, 10s, 15, 20s, and that's basically just the angle of the tip itself. I normally use 15 or 20s. This one's actually a 10, so it's quite sharp, and I've actually just pricked myself in the thumb there before, so we've wiped away the blood and we'll continue. So we'll use that to all our lines with. Remember, when you're routing out, you want to go up to the line itself. Very rarely do you route out on the line, because we're going down 3mm. If you're going to route out on the line there and on the line there, by the time you've gone down 3mm, more so with a 30-degree bit, you would narrow that space there. So we just want to be basically on that side of the line, and we'll come in on that line there. So we're not going to alter that middle section too much. These do have a small shaft on them, a 3.175mm. Now they will fit a Dremel if you're using a Dremel with the router attachment. If not, you need to invest in one of these little adapter reducer collets. Basically just a little tube, 3 slits in, and your CNC bit fits in there nice and snug. That now becomes a 6.35mm shaft on that. That will fit your router no problem. If your router takes half-inch shank shaft, you also need a bigger adapter. So we will use that to do all the lines, all the inset lines here, round the full piece. Once you get in the zone and start doing it, surprising how quick it comes out. Once we've done all the lines, we will come in with our end milling bits. These are just eBay and Amazon. These are fantastic for clearing out, and we don't need to get one that's too big, so we can take that out of there. Remember, we've used our CNC bit, so we will remove that, pop that in there. The older ones come with these barriers on, so you push it up to the barrier. I do have some here without the barriers on. They are basically exactly the same, so you might get lucky. So I push it up into the same adapter, remember, up to your barrier, set it to the same depth. We will use this to clear out all this section, and because we've done the lines already with the CNC bits, this will pop out really nice, no problem whatsoever. Remember your plywoods, they're made of different layers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in this one. We want to come down about 3mm, which literally is the thickness of your CNC bit. So we will say the top 2 layers we're going to take off that, and that is plenty, because we're going to incorporate resin into this. There's no need to go any deeper. You're basically just going to waste your resin. to fill it up. Okay, so CNC bit first. Inside that little adapter, we do all the line works. Then we come in with the end milling bit to clear it all out. We'll have that little Dremel will be coming in with an engraving bit just to tidy it all up. And then we'll come to the scroll saw side of things and cut it all out. Bit of stain on, bit of paint on, bit of spray varnish just to seal it all. And then we'll come in with our resin mixed with acrylic paints and really make this look the red, white and blacks the way it should look. Okay, but for now, the CNC bit, and we can start routing this one out. Right, we're all ready to route out. I made myself a little depth gauge, as I call it. So that's about 3mm, 3.1, and that's first wrong way around. That's 4mm, that's 3. So, and what I do is put the CNC bit in the router. You can just see it there, look, with that adapter collet, and I just set it to the right depth, like so, which I need. There is proper depth gauges you can purchase off eBay. The other option is to just do a bit of samples on this waste bit. Remember, we are going to cut this all out. So do one, and then if you go away, do another project, you can come back. You've marked this one off. You know that's the one you want. So when you come back, you can pop your router on there, set your CNC bit to the same depth, and you can continue where we left off. Okay, that looks plenty of deep for me, so we're going to use that depth. Now we can start routing this one out. Right, so we've done all the lines with that little CNC there. I actually changed this one. This is a 15 degree in here now. Not a lot of difference. That 10 degree, the actual tip broke on me, and that's the first time. If I recall, I was literally coming down this section here, and it broke the tip off. So maybe the plywood's just maybe too hard for those 10 degrees. But 15s, 20s, 30s, you'll have no issues. And you can see from that, we've done all our lines. It's a little bit powdery, it just depends on the wood at the time. We've removed the little mouth there. I will use that as a depth gauge, or either one of the eyes. But remember, with our little depth gauge there, for when we come in with the end milling bits. And if you look close enough, you should just about make out the pencil line. Certain areas like that there, look, not quite on the line. That doesn't matter, that would make any difference to his belt looking. But we will come in with a Dremel and an engraving bit, nibble away with that, or like I say, we're going to put those end milling bits and they will nibble it that way, just as easy. You don't have to get it perfectly spot on, just nice fun projects. Now we're going to pop on an end milling bit. They literally just slot into the same adapter collet. The good thing about these, they route out the side as routing out the base. So we will pop that back in the router. You notice I've removed the mouth section, and we'll sit the router on there. Literally, that is our depth gauge, or we can go back to that. So we will pop that on and remove all the shaded out areas, just to give us the framework left to make like a little barrier when we come to pour our resin in. And we've got a nice size one that should fit in no problem. Surprising how quick it will start coming out once we use that. Because remember, we've also done our lines already, and all this will just pop out fairly easy. Right, you can see from that we've cleared all those sections out with that end milling bit. Everything's nice and smooth. I do find with your plywood, sometimes it's potluck. I mean, you can see a little hole there, look. That's not going to affect us. But looking around there, everything's intact. Sometimes you'll route out and you'll find little voids in there. So you might want a bit of filler just to stop the resin running in from one section to another. But apart from that, everything's fine. And you can just see that pencil line. We're more or less spot on. Just that one there, to be honest. And I've left that deliberately because I took too much off the bottom section. So I compensated by allowing a little bit extra at the top of the piece. And once we've sanded that off there, we're not going to tell anybody about it. So, next stage for me, we're going to cut this out first on a scroll saw. Now the blades on a scroll saw, there's 3 different types of blade. Basic ones anyway. There's fancy ones that have reverse teeth on and stuff, and more teeth. Excuse me. Some have more teeth on than others, but just for a basic scroll saw, you get the pinned ones at the top, you get the pinless in the middle, and you get the spiral blade at the end there. Your pin blade, they come on your more cheaper saws, and they just hook on like so. The only downside with pin blades, and we can use it on this one no problem, because they're all outer cuts. If we were going to cut out the centre of that eye, we will drill a pilot hole and then feed your blade through. Now you wouldn't get this in there because those pins are in the way. So on more delicate stuff, you just wouldn't fit in there with those pins. So your professional guys, they use the pinless blade. And with all your blades, they want to feel smooth on the way down and rough on the way up. That way you know you're in the right way. That would fit in there, no problem. But for me, I use these spiral blades. This is number 2 today, I think 2 or 3, I'm not too sure. And the teeth do spiral the full length of the blade. That means they will cut in any direction. So we could literally start there with our blade and cut that out without turning that wood the ones. Whereas with your other 2 blades, you would have to cut down here, then turn it, cut in, and then turn it. And a lot of spinning and turning, spinning and twisting. But some fantastic guys out there. Straight blades are just not for me. And with my old Draper scroll saw, it only takes pin blades, so I have to use these, what they call adapter clamps. This is just, if you Google Draper adapters, you'll find these ones. There's Axminster, there's different types out there. So I have to put one of those on the top and the bottom of my blade, and they would simply hook onto my saw as if it was a pin blade. They're okay on little projects like this. You also have to use an Allen key to tighten the blade up every time, top and bottom. So feeding it up through the pilot hole, pointing that on there, putting it onto your saw. If you're doing something that's got 300 to 400 cutouts, it can be a bit of a, takes the fun out of it, shall we say. So if you're going to purchase a scroll saw, get one that takes pinless blades, and it'll save you a lot of trouble. Okay, so we're going to cut it out on the scroll saw first, and then I'll come in with the Dremel. I like to use the little engraving bits, a nice flat bottom one. Now it doesn't lead it on this one. They do come in packs of 30 for next to nothing, and there's round heads, flat heads, all different types. But they're just handy just for clearing out inside here. Like I say, it doesn't need a lot. We're not going to see any of this bottom section, but it just lets you get in and remove any of those little fluffy areas. And then because it's cut out, we'll probably come over with a mouse sander or a good bit of sandpaper just to remove those pencil lines like so. And I like to just round these off slightly, just so they're not as sharp. So we'll give it all nice tidy up first, cut it out, tidy it up, and when we come back we'll look into the staining or the painting side of things. But let's cut it out first. Right, so we've set the blade up in the scroll saw. You can just see how my adapter clamps at the top, and there's obviously one under the saw there. And with spirals, just the same mistakes, remember, smooth on the way down, rough on the way up. We've took the tension up, got a nice ping ping sound. My tensioner is right at the back of the saw. On your fancy ones, it's just a quick release at the top here. So if you can you know, can afford a decent saw, try and spend out what you can. But personally myself, I've had this old Drapper. I got it 8 years ago off Facebook Marketplace for £30 here in the UK. And 8 years later, I'm still using it. So you don't have to have the fancy saws to be able to make a project. It probably might just make things a little bit easier. If, like me, if you're in no rush, get yourself something, a little starter saw, and see how you take to the hobby. Okay, so we've got the tension, we've got everything set up. Let's start cutting this one out. Okay, that's enough sanding down and general tidying up for me. So remember, we cut it all out on a scroll saw with that Pegas number 3 or 2 spiral blade. That cut out no problem. We've checked all the sides. We've had no voids. Nice bit of plywood this time round, as you can see from that. So no issues there. The only thing you will find with your plywoods is the sanding down. Don't go too crazy. You can just see there how that yellow start to come through. Now if you're just going to oil this, that might affect the overall finish, but for us doesn't matter. We're going to stain this dark teak as always. I've literally just got enough left in there, and I use this because it just goes on so easy. And for the blacks of the eyes, we will paint the 2 eyes black, and when the white resin goes inside, hopefully they'll just pop out nice. And that would just be simple painter's touch black for that. I do have some acrylic paint, so you could even do that, or even Sharpie pen for those 2 eyes, no problem. But for now, we're just going to put on the stain itself. Always remember, and I say it in every video, do your sidewalls. When we put the resin in, we're not going to come right to the top. I do like to still feel that it's, you can tell it's been routed out. So always do your sidewalls, and the same again on the side of the project itself. And we'll probably end up doing the back piece. So this piece just goes on really easy. Just throw it on like that. Don't be overly concerned. It looks a bit dark when it first goes on, and it's easy enough just to do the full piece. Don't try and do the top sections and try and paint down the sides like that. You'll be there all day. Just throw this on, let it dry out, and you'll have no problem. So that will be that. And obviously I'll do the black for the eyes as mentioned, not forgetting to do all those side walls as well. Okay, so when we come back, this will all be ready spray a bit of varnish on. Okay, so we've done the dark teak. Notice how lighter that's gone now it's dried. Always looks quite dark when you first put it on. We've done all those side walls, and we've also done the back on this one. Not forgetting to do the side walls on those smaller sections. The last thing we want is to put resin in. Remember, we're not coming up to the top, and then you have your bare plywood showing. So it's just as easy, just cover the full piece. Takes a matter of minutes. And we also popped in a bit of black for those eyes. And hopefully when the white centres of resin and the pink outer face goes on, they should stand out really nice. So the next stage for me is just going to spray this with a bit of varnish. You know it's coming. One, it just gives a nice shine to the project, and for me personally, it just finishes it off. And two, a bit of resin might just help seal this plywood so you have less bubbles in your resin. Does it need it or not? I don't know. But for the matter of seconds of spraying the full piece, and then once the resin goes in, this project will be finished. Do not try to put your resin in first and then come and spray your varnish on top. I've done that on a couple of little samples and it sent the resin quite dull. So be careful of that. So I like to spray my varnish first as if it's a finished project, and then once the resin go in, it's finished. It's favourite at the time, 151, just clear lacquer there. Where is it? There we go, just clear lacquer, gloss finish, always a gloss finish for me. So we're going to spray 3 or 4 coats on, we'll take it outside, and once it's nice and dry, we'll pop our resin in, and this little project will be finished. Right, that's enough varnish. Just give it that nice shine. You might just see it from there. And hopefully that's sealed the wood. Like I said previously, I don't think it needs it, but it might just help reduce those little bubbles. But we will get rid of those, no problem. Right, the resin for today, as always for this moment in time, is Vista 1 resin. 2-part your resins. You get A, your resin, and B, your hardener. And this is what they call a 1-to-1 mix. So 1 part of resin to 1 part of hardener. Some resins are 2-to-1, which means you would have twice as much resin to the hardener, 3-to-1, and so on. Some resins are deep pour, some resins are craft resins. Some resins you mix by volume, which is this one, so basically the same amount of each one. Some resins you mix by weight, so you want some digital scales. What I tend to use are these plastic beakers. You get 100 for next to nothing. They have nice little grooves on the side. So I will go A, remember, my resin, and I've gone up 5 for that one. And obviously B, the hardener, and I've gone up 5 and marked that as well. So as long as you've got both the same amount of A and B, you shouldn't go far wrong. When it comes to mixing, I literally transfer B into A because it flows quicker. They do say transfer A and B into a C, a 3rd cup, something I've never done and I've never had any issues. For mixing wise, these plastic knife, forks and spoons are ideal. Same again, pack 100 for next to nothing. They've got a nice big groove in the back there, so once you mix it, you can scoop it out and we'll feed it into our project like so. I have tried on previous projects to use these pipettes. It is possible. You can cut the end off there, suck up your resin if you wanted to, and fill it that way. Just too slow, didn't quite work for me. And I've seen people try these little syringes. You can actually suck up the resin and gently put it in like that, and then dispose of that afterwards. But there, for me personally, I'd just rather just use the back of a knife, fork or spoon. Colour wise, there's powders, inks, dyes. I'm using acrylic paints. I've used these on all my projects and they are good, solid colour, and I've had no issues with those. So we'll use acrylic paints for filling this one in today, colour wise. So we'll mix a bit of resin off camera and then slowly we'll start filling it in. Remember, we're not going to go to the top, and your resins will slightly concave as they cure, basically sinking in the middle. So allowing that little lip just still to show, to prove that we've routed it all out. And remember with your resins, please don't follow me by example. Get your proper gloves on. You want a proper resin mask and plenty of ventilation. Resin is a chemical after all, and if you get it on your skin or you're breathing too much of it in, you could certainly have issues. Okay, so you have been warned regarding the health and safety side of things. Okay, right, like I said previously, I'll mix a bit of resin off camera. We'll come in, we'll add our first colour and basically start filling this one up. Okay, there's our first batch of resin nicely mixed up. You notice there, I've had some resin bits left over from previous projects. I tend to save mine, and I do intend to incorporate them into another project. But what I've done today, and this is the first time, is basically just popped in the white bits, white little pellets, where I know the white resin wants to go. Just in case you go and you think, does that piece want filling in? And you fill that in and realise that needs to be left red. So little markers there, and as we fill each one in, we can remove that, fill that in with white, and then we know and do the same with the next colours until there's not so much going on and a little bit more less confusing, should I say. Now we're going to start with white, fill all the white areas in, and if there's any white left over, we can add a bit of red and get a little pink colour and do the face at the same time. So we're not trying to waste too much as it is. There's quite a lot in there looking at that, but hopefully we've not gone too over the top. They do say with your resins about 10% of whatever amount. First myself, I've just put in what I think, like so, till I get a good solid colour. Give it plenty of mixing, allow it all to mix nicely. It doesn't help when you're trying to film at the same time. You do tend to rush things on as you're filming. And once you put your bit of resin in, get yourself a nice little cocktail stick just to help it along its way. And once each bit of section has been filled up, we'll put in the lighter, like so, one that works, and then we'll go over the top, or there's the bigger ones out there, just to skim over, and the heat from the lighter helps all those bubbles disappear. Right, so here's our first bit going in. So we can remove that section there. These are just temporary markers. You're not forced to use them, but you might just make it a little bit easier. And we can pop a bit in there, look, back of the spoon. See what that looks like. And if it's not strong enough, we can simply just pop a little bit more in. And we'll help it along its way. We're going to just slightly off the top of the piece, so when it cures, it will sink in slightly. Okay, let's try a little bit more on that one. Yes, I think I'm going to go with that. Okay, let's start filling this in. We'll speed things up a bit, and then we'll see what it looks like. Right, there's the last piece, all gone in. We've had no issues with that. If I can hold it up without losing any, we've filled it up more or less to the top, just allowing for that little shrinkage, should we call it, as it starts curing. Right, and each colour's gone in. We literally just skimmed across with a lighter that works and just remove those little air bubbles like that. It is hard to see on the camera, but to the naked eye, you definitely see those little bubbles popping up. And that's it. So we'll leave this for a good 24 hours. Make sure you cover it with something. Any flies or dust, they will find it. I like to use these little bottle caps or tops. Put a few of them on, get yourself a board and basically cover it up like that. Okay, so we'll come back in 24 hours. We'll be back down in the shed and this little project will be finished. Okay, that's it. This little project is finished. Now it's less than 24 hours later. Personally, I will leave this for another 2 or 3 days. But everything's nicely set. We've had no issues. The colours have gone really nice, as you can see from that. And everything's nice and solid. They do recommend 30 days to fully cure. That is your resin manufacturers. But on projects like this, I would be quite happy just to hang that up today. And there we are finished. So it's a jolly little Santa Claus, Father Christmas character. It stands in at 9 inches by 8 inches across. And we routed it out on 12mm plywood. I do find plywood routes out really nice. And I've certainly got no issues with that. And for the routing out, remember, those good old CNC bits. You can't go wrong with those. eBay or Amazon. I'll put a few links in the title for the lines itself. And then for the clear out, these end milling bits. These are all I've really used on a lot of my projects recently. And I've certainly got no issues with those. Once we routed it all out, we get a little tidy up with that Dremel, remember, with those engraving bits. And then we cut it all out on a scroll saw with a Pegas number 3, I think. I'm not too sure if it's a 3 or a 2, but it doesn't matter. 2, 3, 4, 5, they all do the same job. Unfortunately, with my little scroll saw, remember, I have to use those adapter clamps. You are going to purchase a saw, get one that takes pinless blades for sure. Then once we cut it all out on the scroll saw, we literally just came in with some dark teak wood stain, covered the full piece. Not forgetting that little bit of black paint for the eyes there. Sharpie pen, acrylic pen, anything would cover those in nicely. And once we had that bit of white resin in, look, they really popped out nicely. And before that resin went in, I do like to spray a bit of varnish on. That just finishes the project for me. It's hard to see on there because there's not a lot of wood to show, but it just makes that wood shine a little bit better. And obviously it helps seal everything up should it need it. And for the resin itself, Vista one at the moment, that's my favourite. And for the colour, I do like to use acrylic paints. It's a good solid colour, and acrylic paints are really cheap to purchase. But there is dyes out there, powders, inks, whatever you prefer to use. But for a good solid colour, you will not go wrong with acrylic paints. And that's it. This little project is done. So, jolly Father Christmas there, cut out and routed out on 12mm plywood, and then inlaid with resin mixed with acrylic paint. This one actually just stand freestyle, but you could make a little base for that if you wanted to. Personally myself, I'll just put a little hanger on the back there, and that's it. This little project is finished. Thank you very much for watching.